Good afternoon, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Tuesday, October the 8th. Start again with Little Rock School District. You know that the city announced a plan for return of local control of the district. That's up to the State Board of Education Thursday. Interesting developments later after that was reported is that we couldn't get a solid feel from either Governor Asa Hutchinson or his appointed Education Secretary Johnny Key just exactly how they felt about this. We've said that the mayor said they were intrigued. That's not the same thing as approving it. And there's some serious questions whether the state will back off its plan to only give limited control to the district and assert strong state control over some schools in poorer and minority neighborhoods. Questions also raised in an Arkansas Times piece today by Allie Nolan, who's been a leader of the return of local control movement. She says that she welcomes the mayor's interest in the city board's interest. It's past time for the city to be aggressive about the Little Rock schools, but says there's still some serious questions. One is an appointed school board in the interim before an election next year, and how many would be appointed by the state and whether they'd really have local interests at heart and how they might make decisions that would be to the detriment of the district. One of her larger concerns is something that's not going to go away because it's essentially state law, but it's a very good concern, and that is the continued reliance on a single letter grade to grade children in schools. All the research nationwide shows that this is a faulty way to judge schools. Too many academic results are a result of home situations and poverty, particularly not because of a failure of schools or the teachers who are in them. But there'll be more on that. Interesting report from the FBI this week on a man that they now have officially determined is the biggest serial killer in U.S. history, a man named Samuel Little. He's confessed to 95 murders. The FBI says they've confirmed 50 of them. They're still searching to find out if the ones that he's confessed to, but they haven't pinned down, perhaps can be pinned to them. One of those is a case in North Little Rock in 1994, a homeless woman who was killed. He says he disposed of her body. The body hasn't been found, but he told in some detail about how he led to her death. Earlier this year, a Pine Bluff killing was linked to him, and there's a report possibly of some circumstances in a Faulkner County area that might also be tied to his cross-country killing spree over a span of many years. I mentioned yesterday that Rusty Cranford, the lobbyist who's pleaded guilty to involvement in the public corruption case involving kickbacks from a major health care provider in Arkansas, was before a magistrate in Springfield yesterday to argue for release until his sentencing, which may not be for 2 more years because he's going to testify in the one big remaining case that came out of his cooperation with the feds. The federal magistrate took the case under advisement, hadn't decided yet. Cranford said he'd like to spend some time with family. Most criminal defendants would. There are 3 former state legislators who are free awaiting their sentencing. He says he should be treated the same way. The magistrate said he naturally has some concerns about allegations, not part of a charge, but that were made by federal authorities that he'd once talked about killing a cooperating witness in the case. He says he's no longer a danger to anyone. Interesting new book detailed in a book review today in the New York Times by James Stewart, a New York Times columnist. It's a tale of 2 FBI investigations, one of Hillary Clinton and one of Donald Trump. The difference is pretty stark. The FBI, because of a long animus in the New York and Little Rock offices of the FBI, says Stewart, did everything they could do to ruin Hillary Clinton's election chances. Get the bitch, quote, was one of the quotes in his book about their efforts to get Hillary Clinton. The Russian investigation wasn't quite so vigorous, you might say. He's very critical of James Comey and how damaging his misjudgments in handling the Hillary Clinton case were to her presidential campaign. I think we knew that already. It shines a pretty damaging light on the FBI, which ironically enough is not trusted by Donald Trump these days, even though they were critical in his victory over Clinton, at least in the Electoral College, if not the popular vote. James Stewart, I need to remind you, wrote a book, Bloodsport, in 1994 that was harshly critical of the Clintons, so critical, in fact, that Rush Limbaugh praised the book, just to give you some idea. Steve Bullock, do you know that name? I bet not many of you do. He's the governor of Montana. He's a moderate Democrat, although he's pretty good on some red blood Democratic issues like abortion, those sorts of things. He's reasonable on guns, for example, even though he's from a western state. He's the kind of candidate that might have real crossover appeal if only anybody knew about him. Well, he's coming to Little Rock October 24th. Dustin McDaniel, who's a big admirer of his, is going to have a fundraising luncheon for him, and you can go get to see him. I'll have some details on the blog about that if you'd like. The U.S. Attorney in the Western District of Arkansas says he's got a news conference later this afternoon about a major drug case against a doctor from the Texarkana area. More details to come on the Arkansas blog. And finally, there are some Republicans who will criticize Donald Trump. It wasn't over sexual assault. It wasn't over dumping on POWs. It wasn't on ruining the environment. It wasn't on any number of lies and immoral and cruel things that Donald Trump has done. No, but it was something terrible, and it was betrayal of the Kurds, who've been allies of ours in the Middle East for years and years. He's going to leave them to the not so tender mercies of the Turks, and that finally has gotten some people saying, gee, I wish he hadn't have done that. Even Republicans are resisting. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.